Well, hello chaps, and welcome back to another episode of DTH Reviews. Today we are doing a DLC. It is the Left Behind DLC for The Last of Us. I was excited for this because The Last of Us was both of ours favourite game of last year.
Yeah.
As we said in our top 10 of the year. Go watch it if you haven't watched it by now. So yeah, there was a lot of hype behind this DLC. And let's just jump into it. I'll quickly explain the format because they did something a little different. I knew it was going to be a prequel DLC, but what I didn't know is there is kind of two parts to it. There is the prequel section, and then it kind of skips backwards and forwards between a non-prequel section. It is taken part in a section of The Last of Us, which is currently in The Last of Us game. It is not filled, if you know what I mean. Like, there is a gap in the story, and it kind of starts off in the middle of that, and I was kind of surprised because I did not know about.
Yeah,
this.
I had no idea that they were doing that. I thought it was just going to be the stuff with Ellie and
Riley, yeah,
Riley, and then yeah, it starts off with the gap between winter and spring. Yeah, and I had no idea, and that back and forth is one of the best parts of the DLC. I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Like it really helps the pacing. It goes from really quiet, pretty funny stuff with Ellie and Riley to, you know, normal Last of Us, super intense, you know, combat-based regular Last of Us gameplay, and that they did that back and forth really well, and I was really surprised.
I believe the let's call it the Last of Us segment and the Left Behind segment. The Last of Us segment wasn't as interesting as the Left Behind segment because the dynamic didn't change, but I felt like, as you said, the main achievement that the Last of Us segment achieved was, as you said, it was the contrast and comparison between these two timelines and the way that kind of Ellie changed as a person, and also it just felt completely different. Okay, well, I just want to talk about, like, you start off in the Last of Us segment, and it's probably a good way to get used to the game again because I found myself forgetting how to play it. And the Last of Us segment it's kind of like your base standard gameplay. I wasn't too impressed with that segment of the DLC. It was kind of the same old, but it's hard to say same old when The Last of Us plays so well. So even that segment, even though it didn't really do much differently, I had a really good time with it. I think playing as Ellie kind of really changes it. She's not as strong as Joel, so it does play differently. You have to go about combat differently. But I found that when I was kind of messing around with Riley, whenever it transitioned back over towards Joel, it's not like I was like, oh god, no, I still enjoyed it, but I believe the main purpose of it was to add kind of that contrast between both sides of this DLC.
Yeah, the Last of Us section is probably the weaker part of it, yeah. But it's still, you know, like,
that's
it's
how
not
I felt.
Exactly. It's not like it's saying the Last of Us section is shit or anything. It's just slightly less interesting, yeah. And it's and that there's not a ton of combat in it, but there's like one big combat encounter near the end that felt a little excessive, I think.
It was
like it just sort of went on, like it ended, and then you're like, okay, that wasn't so bad. That was like 5 or 6 guys, and then like another 8 poured in, and I was like, well, I've sort of used every resource I have because I forgot how to play this game properly, and now I have to really try hard to get through this section. So that like second half of the end combat encounter felt a little. It just felt like it was too much. Like they just threw a few too many guys after you, especially because it's been like what, 8 months since we have played The Last of Us. Well, it came out June.
Christ.
Yeah, 8 months since it came out, and so, you know, I haven't really touched it since then, and I've forgotten completely how to like approach those encounters, and just that last section was it was tough.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to sound too negative towards the Last of Us section. I just believe that my favorite part of The Last of Us is probably the relationships between characters in the game. Best part of the original game is probably Joel and Ellie's relationship, and we'll talk in a second about Ellie and Riley's relationship, which is also fantastic. So I guess that's why I just was a bit, not disappointed, but, you know, I kind of just didn't want to go back. I didn't want to go away from the Riley section of the DLC whenever I was playing it. So shall we transition into the, well, I was going to say the meat of the DLC, but it's actually pretty 50-50, I'd say.
Yeah, it's like pretty
much dead on 50-50.
Yeah,
but it's my preferred section of the DLC, and that is the prequel, where the setup is kind of... I was kind of surprised by the way it was laid out. I don't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting just to be kind of walking around an abandoned mall and just like frolicking around with one of my friends and just having a bit of fun. And it was really surprising the way they did it, and I really enjoyed it.
Definitely. Like you said, I also, like, I stayed completely dark on it. I just watched that first little trailer that they showed, which was them
the teaser,
walking towards a
carousel.
Walking towards the carousel, yeah. And yeah, I didn't know that it is basically like an hour, or 50% of it, if you just walking around hitting the interact button on various things and getting dialogue between the two, which I don't know, some people might not care for that at all, but it's all really well done. You know, it looks
really
great,
well done,
really well written, and there's some really funny stuff in it, and there's some good, emotional stuff that they cover, which we won't touch on it because it'd be very spoilery, but they do a really good job, and they do some good that section adds a lot to Ellie, I would say. That a little bit more understanding of her prior to the events of The Last of Us, I think, and it does a really good job of it.
I think it's because in The Last of Us she is kind of portrayed as, she's instantly portrayed as kind of like a badass. I think that's why she's likable, because she can handle herself and she's got a foul mouth, and it's kind of nice to see her in this innocent stage where you're kind of just walking around playing games with someone else her age. It was basically just two little girls having fun. I mean, you do like water gun fights, you're throwing bricks around, you're on carousels. It's basically just an hour of you just messing around, and I think it's that contrast from the main game which makes it feel so... it just felt so different.
Yeah, different. That's
it's hard to put in a word, but a good different. And I think... I mean, the voice acting is amazing, and the dialogue, as you said, is so well done. And it's their enjoyment of the little things, and you kind of enjoy it with them, because you have played The Last of Us, and one bit really stood out. There's a bit where I think an escalator turns on, and they're like riding up the escalator like it's a roller coaster. And because, obviously, to me, it felt very unnatural to be on an escalator while playing The Last of Us, I almost had a bit of enjoyment just riding up an escalator, which is something I can't say has ever happened in another game.
No, and I thought they did a good job of, like, how both sections of that DLC of the story, like both stories, how they end, because she explains how the Riley relationship ends, and we know how the stuff with her and Joel ends, and they did a good job of still making it all interesting and surprising without. Even though we know what was going to happen, it was still it's just really well done through and through, which not surprising.
I'll quickly give my opinion on the climax. Obviously, no spoilers. As you said, obviously it's not as shocking as the end of The Last of Us because we kind of knew what was going to happen. But I like the tactful way they went about it. They kind of set it up and then they let you fill in the gaps, which probably doesn't make much sense if you haven't played it, but it was really well handled, and I respected the way they did it.
Yeah, I agree. We should mention it's $15, and it's
it's a bit pricey.
It took me like 2 hours and 15 minutes, I think.
To me, a little bit longer.
I think that's because I had to go roll back and then quickly replay something because I had a little bug. But so yeah, it's like 2, maybe 3 hours, like if you really push it, and move through and look at every single thing, you could get 3 hours out of it, maybe. But so take that into consideration. Like, I think it's really designed for people that played The Last of Us. I mean, obviously you can't play this DLC without having played The Last of Us because it wouldn't mean anything. But it's definitely designed for people that really like The Last of Us and are willing to play more of it, because this is that's it. They're not doing any more story DLC. This is sort of it, and we've had the whole $15 for 2 hours of entertainment conversation a few times over the last couple months, and it's never bothered me because I've gotten used to seeing movies for $15 to $20 for 2 hours, and a lot of the times those things are shit. So, but it doesn't bother me, but I understand why. A lot of people probably won't jump on it immediately because $15 for 2 hours is a a bit of an ask because we have different, you know, value expectations for games, as we've discussed several times, you know. So just know that going in, if you're going to buy it, it's not terribly long.
Yeah, you're right. It might put a few people off, but Last of Us is as close to a movie as it gets. So
it's true. Yeah, the best parts of both The Last of Us and Left Behind is the cutscenes, which and the writing and God, it was really kind of disappointing to turn my PlayStation 3 on, grab that horrible PlayStation 3 controller, and hit The Last of Us Left Behind and see, like, the cutscenes. I mean, the cutscenes are still pre-rendered, whatever, but they look so good. And I was just like, God damn, I haven't seen anything that looks this good on my PS4, which is sitting right beside it. It was sort of annoying, you know, just a reminder of how
Naughty Dog is too good that they actually annoy you.
Yeah, kind of a little bit.
Well, I think the best part of the DLC was the introduction of the character Riley. We didn't talk too much, obviously, because we want to leave it fresh for you guys, but she's a really good element. I mean, when you're kind of set on two characters such as Joel and Ellie, to introduce a new character, you're not sure how you're going to warm to them, but she was good. I'm not sure who the voice actress was, but she did a good job. Ellie, their relationship is surprising, and there's some interesting stuff, and their dialogue is fantastic, and their interaction is really genuine. So that was the best part of it, and it made for a really, really good 2 hours.
I agree.
So I give it a 5 stars.
Really?
I mean, I do. Yeah. As we said, the Last of Us segment was slightly weak, and the price is a little much, but I had 2 great hours. It's just, it's hard to put into words. The Last of Us content. It's just the ultimate gaming experience, in my honest opinion.
I think I agree with that. It was just nice to go back to it and be reminded that I think they could probably, it was sort of like almost a proof of concept, like they might be able to do some sort of sequel, you know, another Last of Us thing. Obviously they could never do the same characters or the same, you know, continuing the story, but I think that world and that universe, and if they continue that quality, is prone for, you know, it's prime for like tons of really, really good stories, and this was another one of them, and it added to, you know, the characters, and it'll be interesting to go and replay The Last of Us in a year or 2 or 3 with the knowledge from this DLC. It's essential if you loved The Last of Us, so...
Yes, definitely, I agree. Thanks very much for listening once again, guys, and we'll see you next time.